single flame can light a million more.
We are going to hop in the Wayback Machine, you and I. We're going to go back in time. We're going to go back to a very young, impressionable 12-year-old kid who, went out in the garage and got his stepdad's Cobra 29 and brought it in the house and hooked it up to an aircraft battery he had at his house. Grabbed a fire stick that my stepdad used to use when he was trucking and clamped it on the rain gutter. And one of the very first people I got to meet on the radio was this guy by the name of Mike Shippey. Called him Double CT, which stood for California Clitoris Liquor, or Clitoris Tickler, CCT, Mr. 531. Anyhow, he had one of these. This is a Texas Star Sweet 16, and he had this in his little blue Ford Bronco 2. Me and Mike became lifelong friends from that, and I always thought it would just be the shit to own one of these. And I've been looking and looking and looking for a virginal one of these for years. Every one of these that come in here, I offer to the guy, hey man, I'll buy it from you as it sits. You know, cash money. And they all say no. Everybody wants me to modify and hot rod these things, and that's what we're going to do to this one here. But I wanted to shoot a little before video. I mean, I got a lot of sentimental memories of the virginal Sweet 16 that he had, and a lot of the things I learned to do to the Sweet that I'm going to do to this one, I learned from him. And he's kind of where I got my start in this ant building thing back when I was 12 and 13 years old. Getting to work on stuff with him down at his house. He's one of many influencing people, but let's get into the present moment. So what we got here is an absolutely pristine, and I mean looks like it's right off the frickin' assembly floor from Texas Star. It's got the Toshibas in it. It's the old style case. Oh, there's Chicky Boo calling me. I'll be right back. Okay. Everybody made it to the hotel and everybody's good to go. Alright. This is a big long body style. I prefer these over the newer ones. These have more heat sink. I prefer them with a fan, upgraded fan kit in them. This one is going to be completely decked out by the time it leaves here. Fan kit, whole 9 yards. So, real quick, we got it powered up. We're going to do a before and an after test. And just real quick, we're going to show you here that it's a 1,000 watt slug in PEP. So, full deflection over there at the 100 means 2,000 watts. So that means 1,000 watts is going to be at the 50 hash mark, which is right there, right on that 50 hash mark. So that's 12, 14, 16, 18, and $2,000. So we're going to see what we get out of it. We're going to hit it with a Striker 955. And we're going to see if we can get any improvement out of it. Because we all know that these took a Texas Star 1-pill modulator as drive. Then you get about 1,500 out of it. Well, with about 80 watts of drive, we should get about 14 stock, which this thing is not going to be that here shortly. And honestly, I don't think that coax connectors have ever been plugged into this box. Not one time. That's how virginal this thing is. And we're gonna pop its cherry. So let's do our test. Hello, audio. About 14 some change on 14 volts. Hello, pulling 74 amps. All right, well, let's do all the power wire upgrades and change a couple things on it and see what we get out of it from there. I'll be back. Man, it's getting late in the day. It's like 3 p.m. and I feel like it's flipping 6:30 at night. God. Oh man, it's all done. You know, over the years I've done this about 14 different ways. At one point I used to strip all the biasing off of this thing, and then I would put a big distribution bar and I'd pull out the fuses in the back. I put these big power cables in here, and none of that's necessary. I have learned over the years, and I started doing a bunch of measurements on these boxes, and I found what I did here is just absolutely perfect for what is needed to make this thing actually jump up and down. The piss-ass design about the Texas Star boards is that the center tabs of the transistors get little to no ground. So you look at it and go, well, you didn't change all that much, you moved one wire. Nah, replaced the wire, and then I replaced all the leads. What comes stock on the Texas Star is 14 gauge wire, and what I put in there was 12. This has got a real thick jacket to it. Believe it or not, same size insulator, vastly smaller conductor on the inside. Proof is in the pudding. Anywho, that and this oxygen-free stinger wire that I use has got like triple the strand count of this, which, if you know how wire works, the more higher your strand count, the more current it can carry. So if it's got 3 times the amount of strands, it means it's got 3 to 4 times the amount of surface, and being that it's a higher gauge wire, that means even more surface area. That means it can conduct a whole lot more current. Now, by simply changing the power distribution, I brought the ground, instead of bringing it to here on the board, I brought it up to here, so it's central. In stock, they have these little tiny jumpers that run between each one of the boards. Well, that's great. That feeds the outsides of the transistors very well. The insides, there's a little tiny trace underneath this transformer, and this transformer, and this transformer, and this transformer. They carry the positive current, or the ground, I mean. Well, 2879s are a current-driven device. It means they operate off how much amperage they can receive. Now, without changing the input, the windings, the input transformer capacitance, output windings, and the output capacitance, you run into a wall, especially with the test that we're conducting today, which is 80 watts of drive on 14 volts, seeing if we can change out just a couple power wires in here, if we can increase the amp's ability to be able to drink more amperage, which means more output. Okay. Same as before, Striker 955. Hello, audio. We're in the 2x scale. Take that down to 1x. Hello, audio. Same 80 watts of drive as that we had in the first video. We're going to change it up to 2x. Turn the power wire or power on. Hello. Hello. We picked up 100 watts. 100 watts doesn't seem like an awful lot until you look at this. Hello, audio. Hello, audio. It's pulling about 20 amps more current. How does that affect your amplifier? It stays cooler. The transistors don't have to work so hard to rectify RF. Without changing any of the tune, simply replacing the power wires and changing a couple small things on the inside of the box, we've made it more efficient as far as its ability to rectify RF? Is it more efficient from the angle of how many amps it's drawing? No, the amps are increasing because the box is able to drink more current, hence the reason it can put out more watts with the same amount of drive. Overall, we've increased its efficiency because the transistors won't have to work so hard to create the wattage, keeps the temperature out of the amp. Big problem. Now look, I'm one of these guys that likes to have the fan on when you turn the box on. I don't like the thermocouple design inside the suite. It's a beautiful idea if they would mount this on the case, where it's got direct contact to something that has heat flow. This is mounted to the board. So the board acts as an insulator from this thermal switch. It's not thermocouple, it's a thermistor switch. So when this becomes hot, the leads close, kicks on the fan kit, and turns the fan on. I had one burn up on me yesterday, you guys. I had a customer contact me. The box got too hot, and solder melted off the board and shorted out, and now I've got to rebuild this guy's amp. That's all there is to it. It's nothing I did wrong. It's nothing he did wrong. It just wasn't getting enough airflow through the box. When I first got back into doing this, I went up to our local CB shop here, and I'd just gone through a divorce, and I needed something to occupy my time that wasn't drinking or any of the other negative things in this world. And I thought, man, I want to get back into amp building. And he gave me a Sweet 16. He says, if you can fix it, I'll pay you to fix it, we'll sell it, we'll get the profits, and we'll split it. I said, okay. And then I popped the tin on the suite. All the parts, the guy had the amp mounted vertically like this, right? He got everything so hot that about 90% of the parts slid off the board. All the transformers and everything are all sitting over here in a clump, and all the wires are melted back. That's why these guys try to put fuses and everything. The only thing the fuses do is make the amp run hotter. That's why I say if you're going to put a fuse in your system, you put it at your battery. And clamp it off where the current comes from. It works way better if it's at the battery too, if you think about it. So, that being said, we're going to modify this thing so when you turn the power switch on, the fans come on. Because we still have this that we need to install. The reason I fell so in love with this box when I first got a clue to it when I was like 12 years old was that there was a fan kit that was involved. Everything else had bitched in raw heatsink up until that point that I'd been exposed to when I was 12. The fan kit for these amps is brilliant. Elevated fans lifted above the heatsink rails allows the air to pick up velocity before it makes contact with the heatsink fins. It allows for uniform cooling out of the front and the back. We don't have to worry about the heat being super saturated. Is that like if I was to have a fan here blowing down on the parts and then wrap it around this heatsink, by the time the air got to about halfway down the heatsink, it's exhausted its ability or limited itself to being able to uptake heat and be able to sufficiently strip it from the heatsink. So the back end of the box ends up getting very hot. At least the heatsink side of it. The component side, because the fans are here, stays relatively cool. So everybody thinks it's a trade-off. Actually, it's a choking point. The dual fans, top and bottom, it allows all the parts to get cool, keeps the RF monster inside the box, but it forces the air out both ends of the cabinet, splitting it with an air wedge from front to back, back to front. I seen this and went, wow, this is brilliant. How little did I know it would turn into these monster things that I built today. 64 pills and 48 pills and 32s and 24s, and it's a hell of a machine I sit behind every day. We're going to modify the fans so that they turn on. And I've already advised the customer there's only one downside to this. The way the electrical circuit is wired inside this box is that the current is constantly hot from here back to the remote plug. This is off. Now you can have a fan switch built into the remote to turn the fans on. But if the customer wants them to be always on, you have to tie it in here. So the way this works is that this does not have any current on it until this thermal switch kicks in, and then it'll energize the circuit. So what you have to guard yourself when you override this thermal switch is that there's always going to be 12 volt on this lead. As you can see, the 3 amp fuse comes off the positive bus rail, which is fed by this piece of 12 gauge wire now. Makes sense? All right. If you plug the fan in, which works off a mono plug, and there's 12 volt current on the box, it will pop this fuse. The next thing it does is it takes out this trace, and then this trace passes through this little via board, goes down and goes underneath, comes out on this trace, poof, pops the trace. It'll pop it from here to somewhere in here, underneath, or it passes underneath through a via, then pops up on the other side underneath this switch through a via, or here. Every single time. When you pop this trace, this is the trace. This trace is the one that you pull all your positive current from to make your sideband delay work and your on-off work. So it goes to the next thing in the fuse. You want to do this at a 3 or 4 amp. You don't want to go any higher than that. I've popped these open and found 25 amp fuses in those holes. If you put a 25 amp fuse in there, you're begging for your box not to turn on and off, and all it takes is for this thing to wiggle loose just a little bit. Okay guys, I'm gonna put the tin on it, and then we're gonna run up the drive and see what we can get out of it. I think we're gonna run into a wall at about 1950, somewhere in there. I'll be back. Now, in all fairness, I wanted to show this before I button this up. I started thinking about what I said in the last video, and I think I gave the impression that all you had to do is add this little jumper, and that's not necessarily true. Well, it's not true at all, actually. You got to disconnect your fuse from here on the board and move it over here to your remote on switch. How this works is when the switch makes contact, it leads 12 volt power over here to this lead, so you can run your sideband delay. This is your feeder lead. Okay, so it switches from here to here, and then from here to here. Make sense? You want to leave the fuse in play to protect the rest of your circuitry. You don't want to jumper this straight over to the switch, because if this plug ever comes disconnected with the fans are on, you want to protect everything else in line. Want to protect everything else in line in the circuit so that the amp will still key up, so you're not stuck out there not being able to key. Alright, I'm going to put the bottom tin on the top portion of the amp, and then turn the bottom into the top and the top into the bottom. We'll see what I mean here in just a minute. I'll be back. So what we've done here is we've fully installed the fan kit on this puppy, which to me this is one of the sexiest boxes ever built. A Texas Star Sweet 16 with fan kit that has never been in a smoking environment. Everything is brand new. Everything is clean. Now, what I meant by taking the top, turning it into the bottom, and the bottom turning it into the top, is if you look at it, now all the writing's right side up, because everybody always puts these heat sinks side down, and because it comes with a lid on this side, everybody thinks that's the top. And actually, the heat sink is. It was always designed to be set on its lid, because think heat rises, right? I mean, they did such a good thing with this when they designed this fan kit. They even put a little guard here so that there was a little bit of space between the heat sink and the fan blades. It allowed for velocity, basically. A little bit of dead space for the air to be able to uncompress and be able to uniformly spread itself across the heatsink fins. Nice big heavy duty rubber feet on the bottom of it. Loved this for over 20 years, this exact style of amp. Now if you stand way back, and you take a minute and you look at the top and the bottom tin, they're not the same width. Now I've had guys in the past where they've gotten two bottom tins, and they come to me and say, make me a fan guard for it. The problem is that this isn't the same height. Okay, so I've seen lots of different things. What you end up having to do is drill into the heatsink instead of using the stock holes. The bottom tin, the one with the feet on it, that's the one that goes on the inside. So you see here, it's on the inside. The one with a fan on top for the heat sink with the lip on it, that's the one that goes on the outside. It's slightly wider, slightly longer. And I see these all the time, people that come in and this tin's stretched out and this is on the inside. And if you stand back and look at it, the edge of the cabinet will be bowed. This will be bowed out and the top one will be bowed in. So there is a top and a bottom to these fan kits. Now, the downside to these is two things. Now, the first major downside is when you go and you put the tin covers on, it covers up the little label that would normally sit right here that tells you radio antenna. I grabbed the little label making machine and I printed you up one, bud, so there won't be any confusion. And most guys will take it and put a Sharpie on it and that looks all tacky and cheap. This thing is pretty pristine, as in like very virginal. I had to do the 11 meter conversion on this particular unit. I didn't cover that in the video because, well, it's a gray area in the law. If you want to know how to do it, go to cbtricks.com. They've got a complete step-by-step picture breakdown. It is applicable for the 350s, the 250s, the Killer Bee, the 400, the 450 high drive. It's not applicable to the 667, the Sweet 16, or the 1200. This style or the new ones, but you get the idea of how the board works from the page, and it's pretty simple. It's, so they say, cut 2 wires and solder one in, and you'll see. We're not going to cover that here today. The other downside to this is this right here. High velocity fans make noise. They make noise. Now, the fan kits for the 3200, which was 2 of these units basically bolted together, was about yay this wide, which I have repaired 2 in my time. Had a lot of problems with catching on fire and burning down. And the reason they did is because of all the shitty wiring they, this shit. Too small a gauge, over too far of a distance, when all they had to do was use something like this. And they had heating problems because they didn't go with these high velocity fans on the tins. And they get hot, soldered melt down, poof, you have fire. They didn't make very many of those, but they made a lot of these. And this is one of the cleanest ones I've seen come in here in a long time. It doesn't have a scratch, a scuff, nothing. I'm going to put it back in its original bag, man, and then I'm going to take it over and have them package it up and send it back to you. But let's have a little fun driving this thing now the fan kit's in there. So I had to dig around. I had to get my old Texas Star modulator out. This thing is a rust bucket, but it is old reliable. It's been with me for a long time. I'm going to hit it with my RCI 2950. We're on the 2x scale again. Hello, audio. Hello, audio. Now, with the 2950 hitting it, I'm getting about 100 watts out of this little modulator, which is nice and safe. But since we've gone it on board, and we've modified some of the electronics on the inside, it's okay to go up and drive. I'm going to hook up my Connex 4400, which does about 125 watts, and we're going to see a corresponding output and output power. See, it puts out significantly more bird. Its peak power is around 1800 watts, 1700 watts, somewhere there. The invenerable Sweet 16, boys and girls. Modified, but still somewhat stock. Pretty, but still does the job. Now, if we wanted to, like I said, we could go in there and change the output transformer windings, change the output tuning from 1250 down to 1000. We take the input and take it down from 1560, take it down to 330 on the capacitance on the transformer, take 1.5 turns out of each one of the input transformers, And then we could go in and disable the bias for sideband and make it into a Class C monster, and it'd jump up there and do about 2300 watts. But a lot of guys, they don't want to give up their sideband capability. They just don't. Done. Invenerable Sweet 16. I didn't want to go hog wild on this thing. I didn't want to have 1/0 gauge cable coming out of the back of it, which I have done that on some of them. In the past, I sure have. Cable, 2 pieces of cable coming out of the back the size of my thumb. Didn't want to go all hog wild on this. It was, it's too pristine. It's too clean. It's too new. Man, it'd be like taking a brand new Henry and monobanding it. You know, or taking a Collins and just making it so it only works on one frequency. I couldn't do it. Now, if this showed up and was all covered up in scratches and beat to hell, let's dump a bunch of wire in it and see what it does. This is a measured modification. Just polishing, just a little bit. In its day, it was light years ahead of its competition. Now it's kind of a dinosaur, but it's a good dinosaur. Another thing I always wondered is why they never took the fan kit and flip-flopped it. Because you can see as in the case is that notch, the top and the bottom tins are notched, right? So this has to be indexed this direction. I don't like having all this mess over here. I wish they'd do it over here. I mean, we'd take all the fans off and physically rotate everything around. But, is what it is. Gentlemen, my name is BBI. Without a shadow of a doubt, I am the biggest mud duck in Idaho. Please come check out our webpage, www.bbiamps.com. Call me on the phone. Text me. Send up smoke signals. Whatever it takes, I'll do whatever I can to help you out. Gentlemen, one more guy 10-8 and straight with one of his beautiful boxes. I'll see you guys. Bye.